Good morning, Boker Tov. We are just one day away from the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. Today is September 5th, and soon the Jewish community will be joining together as one people with one heart to welcome 5782. My name is Rabbi Chaim Dov Belyak, and I'm the volunteer executive director of Friends of Jewish Renewal in Poland. I'm joined today by a number of colleagues who are on screen with us today. And the purpose today is to celebrate the concerns of the late Cantor David Wisnia. We'll tell you more about his biography. Primarily today, we'll have the opportunity to listen to the music that was a part of his life. He forms an important bridge to the world of the Polish synagogue. I want to first welcome you to the program that we call Freighted Legacies. It is a program series that began in July, with a number of important topics, and we'll be continuing approximately once every 3 weeks with important topics, which we'll announce at the end of the program. I want to first introduce some of the people you see on screen. First, the chairman, who at this moment will just acknowledge his presence, Marek Jazowski, the chairman of Beit Polska, the umbrella organization of progressive Jews in Poland. He's actually serving in another role today. During the early part of the program, he will be translating the program into Polish. And most of our programs, as you have already understood, are in the dual language, Polish and English. And just to remind everyone that if you go to the bottom of your screen, you see at the very bottom the opportunity to choose the language that you want to listen to the program in. I also want to acknowledge the presence of Dominika Zakraszewska, our program coordinator, who is working all of the technical things for us today, but is really the person who will, in many of the future programs, be a co-host along with Mark Jazowski and myself. And finally, today, one of the co-translators is Marzena Szymanska, who's really one of the key people who's been working with us as a co-translator on many projects that are available to people. You can find out about them at our website, Jewish Renewal in Poland. So let me turn to our panelists today. First, very good friend, Neil Brostov, who is a talented musicologist, a talented teacher, a man of great energy, and who has almost single-handedly kept the flame of Jewish music in many forms, but especially a love and devotion to the music that has been produced, again, in many forms of Polish music. We welcome you to our panel this morning. Neil has taught at UCLA and many venues, and is presently the entrepreneur and maestro of many online activities that are taking place at Pierce College, in the Valley, and we appreciate very much his presentation. He's also helped us put together many concerts, and we're looking forward to when we resume in-person concerts that he'll put together in Poland. Welcome, Neil, to the panel.
Good morning. Thank you.
And I want to introduce next the grandson of David Wisnia, who I had the privilege of meeting several times, both in Poland and also here in Los Angeles. Avi accompanied his grandfather and accompanied his grandfather on many of his concerts. And it's with a special sense of the fact that having the opportunity to be close to his grandfather in this time, that we are privileged to look at and listen to the music that is so much a part of the family legacy. Avi is in his own right a musician, specializing in Brazilian music and the bossa nova world of music. And we'll let him say something about his work. But Avi, welcome. You're speaking to us today from Philadelphia. Is that right?
Yes, Dzień dobry, shalom, and hello from beautiful, cloudy Philadelphia today, but it's a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to begin our panel today with at least saying that we're going to speak little and allow us to hear a lot. We, because of some technical challenges, are going to be listening more to the music than we had hoped. Also that you'd be able to see the performances, but there will be an opportunity for being able to hear David Wisnia's performances. I must tell you that there's a secret that I went to school with David's son Eric, Avi's father, and it wasn't until many years later that we learned of David's special biography. And Avi, I thought maybe if you could just share a little bit of the biography of your grandfather, it would help us to know something about his connection to Poland and his early life surviving in Auschwitz.
Sure. So yes, my father, Eric Wisnia, is a rabbi and went to rabbi school with Rabbi Chaim Beliak. And I grew up because as the son of a rabbi, I grew up quite literally in the synagogue. So I was always at synagogue, attending services, very familiar with music, and it's where I first fell in love with music and making music with other people in the synagogue. And of course, my grandfather, my father's father, was a cantor. And so from as young an age as I can remember, I would see my father on the pulpit as a rabbi and my grandfather at a different temple as a cantor. And so my youngest memories of my grandfather are of him singing at a particular congregation, Har Sinai, in Trenton, New Jersey. He was a cantor at several congregations later in life. And so I always knew him at the cantor with this big booming voice, this very operatic voice that blended opera with Jewish tradition. And it wasn't until I got a little older that I realized just how much his voice and music in general was a part of his life. And not only just a central part of his life, but a part of his story, and actually was instrumental in saving his life when he was younger. So my grandfather was born outside of Warsaw in Sochachev, and he grew up as a singing star there. He was singing from a very young age in front of audiences. And when his family eventually moved to Warsaw, he had dreams of becoming a singing star. And in fact, that's kind of the trajectory he was going on. That singing was going to be his life, and he was going to be this big celebrity in the style of many of his mentors and teachers and the famous singers and cantors of that time. And he was singing in a synagogue in Warsaw also. And we'll get a little bit more into this background and what his singing was and what his history was and his schooling in voice. Of course, 1939, when the Germans invaded Poland, eventually my grandfather was taken to Auschwitz, and he was there for 2.5 years, enduring torture and pain and unspeakable horrors. But his voice would serve to save his life in the camp. Eventually, he was chosen to entertain the Nazi guards at night. And so singing in this way helped him become what he called a privileged prisoner, which just meant that he was able to live just another day because he served a purpose. His voice served a purpose for the Nazis in the camp. He later managed to escape and was found by the 101st Airborne American Army, and they brought him back to the United States, where he quickly tried to make a new life for himself. And that's where he found that singing would again save his life, because it helped him find a new life. And he was able to find his voice again in the synagogue, although this time in America.
So, Avi, why don't we pause there, and why don't you introduce the first of the pieces, and Neil, perhaps you can chime in at this point to share what it is we're going to listen to.
So She'ebona Beis Hamikdash, may the temple be rebuilt, has one particular familiar melody that we will hear sung by Cantor Wisnia and with Avi accompanying him at the piano. So it's a Hasidic melody, and it's a favorite. Sometimes we call it a warhorse of cantors to sing, especially in arrangement by Meyer Machtenberg, of 3 cantors and piano together. But this is just 1 cantor and 1 piano, and here it is.
Yehi ratzon milfanecha, Yehi ratzon milfanecha, Yehi ratzon Yehi ratzon, Yehi ratzon, Yehi ratzon. May it be thy will. That's these 2 words. That's what it means. Yehi ratzon, ratzon milefanecha, Yehi ratzon milfanecha, Hashem Elokeinu. Eloi Avodeinu. May it be thy will, O Father. שיבנה בית המקדש במהרה בימינו ותן חלקנו בתורתך. שיבנה בית המקדש במהרה בימינו רצון מלפניך רצון יהי. שיבנה בית המקדש במהרה בימינו כי מעולם וכשנים קדמוניות. שיבנה בית המקדש במהרה בימינו כי מעולם וכשנים קדמוניות. שיבנה בית המקדש במהרה בימינו יהי רצון מלפניך רצון יהי. רצון מלפניך יהי רצון מלפניך שיבנה בית המקדש שיבנה בית המקדש ותן חלקנו בתורתך ושם נעבודך ביראה ושם נעבודך ביראה ושם נעבודך ביראה. כי מעולם וכשנים קדמוניות.
Thank you. That is an amazing video. I didn't think we would have video, so we actually let it go a little longer than we had planned. Avi, how long ago was that video made?
We made this video in 2017 was the recording. So my grandfather was already, I would say he's 90 or 91 years old at this point in the video. And as you can hear, towards even at the end of his life, he died when he was 94, just a few months ago. And he was still singing up until the very end, and he was still singing as if he was on the pulpit, how I remember him as a child, in full voice, in full spirit. And the idea of making that recording that you heard, there's a series of these videos, I think, in fact, we might see another one, is that throughout my grandfather's life, for the role that his voice and music played, there was not too many recordings actually of him singing and his music. And so as I started traveling with him and learning more of his story, a project that became very important to the family was trying to preserve and save the music, to save his voice, because within his voice is his legacy and his story. And so we did this little house concert in Bucks County, Pennsylvania here to give him a chance to platform his songs that were very meaningful to him. And of course, our collaboration and, being able to accompany him on the piano was very meaningful as well.
I think maybe we should go to the second video that we have, and it is a video that takes place at a memorial in Auschwitz. And one of the very important events was that when there were memorials at Auschwitz in the last several years, in bitter cold in January, David insisted on going. David and Avi, I thought maybe you should tell the story of this last visit. This, I think, is a recording from the last visit where he sang the El Malei Rachamim prayer, which Neil, if you could introduce the prayer, and then Avi, if you could tell us the context.
So El Malei Rachamim, observant Jews will say Kel Malei Rachamim, more appropriately, so that kind of like we say Hashem rather than Adonai in many cases. In any case, at every funeral, the cantor or the rabbi will intone the text of El Malei Rachamim for the departed, and it's which includes the Hebrew birth name and the parents of the deceased, and it's a beautiful prayer with a traditional melody. There aren't a lot of variants to it, even though some composers have written their own El Malei Rachamim versions, and I will endeavor to find this in the list of video and audio recordings after Avi says a few more words about this.
Sure, I'll have it. And Neil, if you need me to make an extra lengthy introduction as you find it, just let me know. But I will say that the context of the video that you're about to see, I believe this one was taken in 2015. So that was the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. And of course, for many years, the Auschwitz Memorial and Museum has hosted commemorations to remember what happened in Auschwitz, to honor survivors. They invite heads of state and presidents, and they broadcast it to millions around the world as a way of remembering the Holocaust and marking the occasion. And of course, every time there is a memorial and a commemoration, there are less and less Holocaust survivors that are well enough, and in some cases alive, to be able to visit. So it was very important for my family and for my grandfather to be able to go in person. And it was a very strange kind of feeling, because you go and it is held, as you'll see, in a giant tent, because as Rabbi Beliak said, it is very cold in January in and around Auschwitz. And so they have this big heated tent that actually covers what's known as the death gate at Auschwitz-Birkenau. So the very same place where cattle car after cattle car of people, Jews, Poles, Hungarians, anyone who the Nazis deemed unworthy, they were transported there to work or to die. And this is where my grandfather stood 70 years later, no longer as a prisoner, but as a survivor. And he stood in full voice to say this memorial prayer for those that had died and for all the tragedies that happened there, to remember and to honor and to commemorate.
I have a question for you, Avi, before I fish for this video so that we could see it.
Yes.
Do you recall conversations with your grandfather? Because I know he did this more than once, I think, right? Return to Auschwitz to sing El Mali Rachamim.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay,
he came a few times.
sure. But before the first time, do you recall any conversations with him about being conflicted about doing something that was so emotionally fraught for him after after many years after liberation from the camps?
I know for in talking to lots of different survivors and descendants of survivors, every family is different. Every survivor deals with it in many ways. There are many survivors who will never go back to Auschwitz or never go back to Poland, and it's certainly understandable. My grandfather was never one to talk about emotions in general.
Mm.
So getting to the deeper root of why or how he felt was never really a conversation that you could have with him. But you always hear it in his voice when he sings. That was something that was so wonderful about having him as a singer, is that his emotion was in his voice when he sang, and you could hear it when he sang. As a matter of fact, he went back to Poland many times over many decades, start as early in the 1950s. And he really went back many times, not just with me, but with his wife, my grandmother, with different members of the family. And we think he was always looking for something. He was always looking for maybe relatives that had survived, which they had not. His childhood, which he longed for, which was erased by the Nazis and the Germans. But he was always trying to go back and, in a lot of ways, where many other survivors could not do that, I am very grateful that he was able to go back and show me where he came from and tell me some of the stories of what he went through, which he was not able to do for a long time. It was only really later in life that he was able to open up about at least what happened to him, the facts of what he went through. And so I think there was certainly always conflict, internal conflict with him about going back and what he expected to see and what he expected to find. You never really heard him talk about it, but you can certainly hear it in his voice when he sings.
Thank you. Thank you. No, that was good to hear. All right, I will look for the appearances or the 70th anniversary of liberation appearance now.
So we're going to hear the El Mali Rachamim.
Right. So I need to just go ahead, and I think I'm going to see it in this list here. Yes. This is audio. I'm not sure.
No, it will actually be, I believe it's video 1 on the bottom there.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
So that's just a short selection. I'd like us to just tell you that we put the link of Jewish Renewal in Poland, the page of David Wisnia, because there are a number of videos there. In fact, one of the videos actually describes his feelings upon returning to Poland in a conversation with one of our prayer leaders, Iza Foremniak. He describes his joy actually in being at Beit Warszawa, the Progressive Synagogue, and I highly recommend this 4-minute video that you'll find there. I'd like us to turn to the audio of Sim Shalom, which is an opportunity for us to hear one of the pieces that was a very popular piece that was sung in the Tlomackie synagogue. It originated actually at the hand of a German Jewish composer, Janowski, and of course I will not go into taking Neil's and Avi's role as the historian of the music, but I was fascinated that this composer began his life in Berlin, went to Japan, and was in 1937 able to leave Japan and come to Chicago, where he spent most of his career writing liturgical music, and much of that music became part of the Jewish world before World War II, and is part of what we'll hear performed with Sim Shalom. This was a piece that also appears on our website, but we're going to hear it with the choir. Avi, can you tell us which, what's this? This is the Har Sinai choir.
Yes, this recording that you'll hear was a series of recordings that was made upon when my very close to when my grandfather retired from being a congregational cantor. His congregation in Har Sinai, the Har Sinai congregation in Trenton, New Jersey, they recorded this at the hands of one of his accompanists there, whose name is Laurent Levy. And it's really wonderful because the recording captures this grand sanctuary in Trenton, New Jersey, this beautiful, wonderful space, and you can hear the acoustics in this recording. And not just that, but you can hear the choir that my grandfather sang with in New Jersey. And what I love about this recording is not just this grand setting and these acoustics and this choir, which sounds so fantastic, but it's very reminiscent of what I understand is how my grandfather sang as a child in Warsaw in the great Tlomackie synagogue. The grand acoustics of that great temple, the choir that he always talked about being the soloist, but being backed up by this multi-person choir behind him, and the great accompanists that he worked with. And so you really capture that sound, and it's very easy to imagine him singing this not just in New Jersey, but also in Warsaw.
Just to add,
yes,
sorry.
But Neil.
Okay. Just to add a couple of words to what Avi said. First of all, Sim Shalom is towards the end of the Amidah service. We hear it Friday night. We hear it, I think, Shabbat morning, and many versions of it. But the beautiful one with choir, there aren't that many, of these more formal versions. There's one by the American composer Michael Isaacson, but also, of course, Janowski. And it's become a synagogue favorite in the last several decades that I know of. And Janowski also was born in Poland, but the family moved to Berlin when he was about 6 months old. but he claimed that he was born in Berlin because, as I understand it, it was marketable to say that you were from a large city rather than a village in a country. And that's why you would say, I was born, could have said like Berlin adjacent, perhaps, but in any case, and then he came to the United States and became a celebrated composer and cantor. And also, just one more word about the Tlomackie synagogue, in that it was such a progressive synagogue for its time, because the whole idea of having an organ as an accompaniment and having choirs sing is something that really started after the Haskalah. So this was the thing in Vienna with Solomon Sulzer, the reformist in Jewish liturgy, that was kind of the counterpart to Martin Luther in Germany 400 years before that, 300 years before that. And it's very interesting, but the choir was still men only. It wasn't a mixed choir as we are accustomed to now in progressive movements, especially in the United States. But having the organ was a really, really big thing. And the synagogue was perhaps the largest synagogue in the world at its time, and then of course just completely destroyed by the Nazis in the 1940s. So I will look for this now. Does anybody else have anything to share before I
think we should hear it.
I'm sorry?
We should hear the
Yes, okay.
Shalom.
Okay. Okay, so now this is a little ghosted, but I'm looking, here's Sim Shalom, but that's audio only. Avi?
Yes, this will be the audio only.
Okay.
So if you click on that, it should go there.
Good. Thank you. Thank you all for your patience.
Thank you. That's a beautiful piece. It's a prayer for peace, and it's a profound wish at this time of year. We're going to close the musical portion of today's sampling. We have, as you could see, a good deal more material, including a very moving video of David Wisnia in the living room of one of our friends with Cantor Joel Gold that we will at some future date share with you. But we thought it appropriate in the spirit of the upcoming holiday to conclude with a piece that was actually written by Avi Wisnia, in which David sings. It's based on the High Holiday Liturgy, and it's with David on Avi on piano, and it's Av Harachamim. Neil, if you could look for that, and
Sure.
we're going to spend a moment. Avi, if you could just introduce the piece, and then we'll have a few moments for questions, and we'll introduce the upcoming programs in the Freighted Legacies series. Again, this is an audio piece.
Lo nifrado לעשות רצון קונם וחפץ צורם יזכרו אלוהינו לטובה ושאר צדיקי עולם וינקום נקמת עם עבדיו הספוך ככתוב בתורת משה איש האלוהים הנינו הנינו גויים עמו כי דם עבדיו יקום ונקם ישיב ונקם ישיב ונקם ישיב לצערו וכיפר אדמתו עמו.
I want to thank Neil. I want to thank Avi, who was going to introduce this last piece. Could you say a word about it, please?
Sure. So that piece I had actually I was inspired by reading in the Machzor at Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services of reading this piece of liturgy. And this was actually when I was in high school and I was thinking about applying for music school myself. And as part of my application process, I wanted to include some compositions. And I was inspired listening to my grandfather sing all my life and thinking about, I had never really written anything in that vein, in his style of cantorial singing, and the way that I knew that he had been taught. And so this was my attempt to try and blend those worlds of more contemporary Jewish music that I had heard and that I was used to singing myself with his style of singing and his style of chazanut. And so I composed this piece to the liturgy, and it's really great to hear my grandfather's voice preserved on this recording that means so much to me, especially now as we're turning the page on a new Jewish New Year and looking ahead at things to come and thinking about everything that my grandfather went through in his life, and that he was always able to find the music and the joy in singing, even after what he went through. And that is, I think, a real lesson for all of us during the high holidays.
Avi, I want to thank you for
beautiful piece.
participating. I want to turn to you, Neil, first of all, with a special thank you, because you carried a good deal of the technical burden today. But I also want to say that our hope is that in the future, as we do more of the programs of music that has influenced Jewish culture from Poland, that you will be our guide, not so much in the hot seat, but in the lecture seat and in the guiding seat. And I want to thank you for your expertise today. If you have a final word to share with us.
It was a pleasure being a part of this event. I really look forward to more in the future. And I was also going to ask Avi just a couple of things that might be of interest to our auditors, and that is that since in the famous Tlomackie synagogue, where one of the 2 or 3 most lionized East European cantors of the entire 20th century also reigned, and that is Gershon Sirota, and that, as I understand it, Cantor Wisnia sang as a child in the choir of the synagogue when Sirota was the cantor there. But also another cantor who was not born in Poland but spent a lot of time there and then wound up in the United States, Moshe Kusevitsky, one of 4 brothers who became cantors in the United States, and whose cousin Serge Kusevitsky was the conductor of the Boston Symphony, one of the greatest conductors by any measure of the 20th century. And the question is that since Moshe Kusevitsky took over from Sirota, Avi, do you know if your grandfather also sang when Kusevitsky became Kusevitsky became the cantor at the Tlomackie synagogue in 1927 or 28? Do you know about that and in your grandfather's potential, singing as a child also with him?
Yeah, again, getting a lot of these details about his childhood was very hard because it wasn't something that he talked about often. In fact, his childhood, because his parents and his brothers were all killed, it was really a part of his life that he pushed away and never talked about, especially with his family. I think he was trying to keep us from that. But as I mentioned, later in life, he would start to talk about it. And one thing he did mention was that he was very proud of how he studied, and that he was under the tutelage of both Sirota and Kusevitsky, and that he learned from both of them, and they were both his mentors. And I believe that Kusevitsky later, after the war, came to hear him sing as a cantor and actually gave him the seal of approval.
Very nice to hear that. Thank you. Thank you.
We actually have a video where he actually refers to both of them, and we will play that video at some later point. This is called sort of inviting people to a Vorspeise of things to come. We're coming close to the time when we would normally entertain questions. At this time, though, I would like to ask Mark Yazowski if he can move out of the role of interpreter and bring us greetings. We will make some short announcements and want to thank our panelists. Mark?
Mark might be muted now.
Are you muted?
I am muted. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Am I
Yes.
on? Okay, excellent. Thank you, Dominika, for switching me back into this main floor. So this was indeed a joy and an honor for all of us, I believe, to be co-witnesses of the great legacy that Avi has brought us, of his grandfather, who also brought in the legacy of a Polish synagogal music through him. Even though he did not talk much about it, we hear that in his music very clearly. I'd like to just end and briefly express a great joy at this series, having created opportunity, topics of common interest for Jews living around the world, throughout the world, but particularly also the remnant living here in Poland. And this is particularly, let's say, liberating for us here in Warsaw and other places around Poland to be in touch with you and to share back and forth the riches of common heritage. I'd like to take this opportunity to express my deepest wishes of a good new year, of Rosh Hashanah, and of a sweet new year, Umetuka, to all of you as we sit here in these last moments together, which, by the way, doesn't have to be a one-off, but we can continue meeting, as you heard from Rabbi Chaim, and will hear from him in a second. We have a regular program series which will be moving forward in the coming weeks and months and hopefully years for the benefit of all those interested in the Polish Jewish heritage. Over to you, Chaim, to give us a foretaste, as you said, of the things to come as well in the coming weeks. And they are great, and there are many.
Thank you, Marek, and let me add my thanks to our coordinator, Dominika, our translator, Marjana, again to our panelists, to you, our chair, Marek. I want to call your attention to the fact that we have two programs coming up, one on September 19th, that will be led by Joanna Michlitz. Some of you have had a chance to meet her already. The program is entitled The Return of the Image of the Jew as Poland's Threatening Other. It's a major essay that she has written, which is an addendum to a groundbreaking book that she wrote in 2006. And that essay will be available to people to read beforehand if they like, in English, and we invite people, whether they've read the essay or not, to join us on September 19th. On October 10th, Jan Grabowski, Canadian-Polish historian. By the way, these two programs will be in Polish. We English listeners will listen to the English translation. We'll speak about the book that he wrote, Night Without End. I will not try to visit you with my Polish. The book will soon be published in English, which caused quite a stir in Poland. It's a 1,700-page study that he will talk about, and we will be given the opportunity to read a review of the Polish book, which will be available to people to read if they'd like. Jan Grabowski will talk about the book, but more importantly, and alongside of that, he'll talk about the recent court case where he was accused, along with Barbara Engelking, of defaming Polish mayor, and was eventually acquitted. That will be, I think, of groundbreaking significance for our listeners. And finally, October 31st, Friends of Jewish Renewal is about to publish a Polish edition of Rabbi Walter Rothschild's The Honey and the Sting, which is an introduction to Judaism book. And we're going to have a panel of people, including Rabbi Alan Isser, a frequent visitor to Poland, Professor Miroslav Patalon, and of course, Rabbi Walter Rothschild, the author of the book, who'll talk about the question, does Poland need an introduction to Judaism? We look forward to these talks, and you'll be hearing about many of these topics in the future. I want to add my wishes for a sweet, peaceful new year to all of you. And I want to add my request that you support our work. These things cost money to do. And like every organization at this time of year, we seek your financial support. You can go to our website, and we hope that you will be able to give generously and to share with your friends and everyone this unique program. Chag Sameach, Shana Tova. Shana Tova to everyone.